Hey everybody, it's Stacey Tuttle with Bridges 527, and I got to see the new Spider-Man No Way Home movie tonight. It was a packed theater. I think there was like two empty seats in the whole thing. It was super crazy packed, which never happens in our little town. And not only that, every theater of the night, like I was checking online, they were all packed like that. So this is a huge opening. And I will say that multiple times, I think four different times during the movie, the whole theater broke out in clapping, which a couple of times I didn't really get, like I'm missing something. And I've seen them all, but I'm apparently not the diehard fan that some people are, because I was, or that everyone else was, because I didn't fully get why everyone was clapping, but it was a good movie. But just know that there is a huge cult following for Spider-Man. And so this is a huge opportunity to have like a million great conversations with people, because these movies are packed with opportunity to have conversations about really great deep things. And I'm going to share a couple of different things, but one of them especially was one of my favorites. So, but let me start with just a little bit of unpacking about just superheroes in general, because I think it helps me to understand, like, I grew up loving Superman, and I'm learning there's like a huge thing about Superman versus Spider-Man, Iron Man, some of these guys, and why certain ones have different appeal to us on different levels. And I think that kind of also is part of this discussion. So the first thing, Superman is really a Christ figure. He comes from another world, but he becomes incarnate, right? In flesh, lives on our earth, puts aside some of his powers, lives a little bit limited so that he can be in the flesh as a person and understand humanity. And then at times he has supernatural strength that he's able to help with, but he's also perfect and he doesn't lie and he does all these great things. So very much a Christ figure. But people, I think there's a distrust that happens against authority figures. And honestly, as I've gotten older, I think when I was younger, people liked Superman better. But the older I get, the more people don't like him, because there's kind of a distrust of God and authority figures that have too much power. So, and it's like nobody's perfect, whatever. So I think our response to Superman often in our culture reveals a little bit of our issues with God the Father. But he is very much a Jesus Christ kind of figure, come to earth, willing to sacrifice his life for humanity, and living as kind of a protector of them. So I still love Superman for that. But then Spider-Man is, I would say, the Christian story. So he's like the common everyday man who, actually probably less than that in some ways, like he's not some great he's this awkward kid, right, who feels ignored and overlooked and kind of bullied and whatever, but then something happens to him that gives him supernatural strength. And then he's got purpose and vision. And if anybody, when the first one, the Tobey Maguire came out, John Eldridge's book, I was just reading it at the time, and it blew my mind because the original Tobey Maguire, whatever, original sort of movie followed the ideas in Wild at Heart to a T. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the ideal manhood kind of story that he puts out. So I think it really calls to us, because there's that sense of we're looking for something to come and make us more than we are. We see our weaknesses, but we want to be called to something greater. And we want to make a difference in the world. And so he felt like he wasn't enough. He needed Eldridge's book, men need a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, and an adventure to live. And we watch him go from having none of those to having all of those, and how that transforms his life. So it totally impacts that book. But I think that the general story of Spider-Man just really appeals to us in our humanity, because it is our story. And that's why it resonates so deeply, why the theaters are packed when it comes out, more than like any of these other superhero movies. Iron Man also kind of has that same kind of idea. You've got this broken man, something that kind of empowers him, and he goes on. I think the big difference with Iron Man is that he is very much more self-made, because he's super smart and he works hard and he makes these things happen. To the Spider-Man story, though, is literally something external empowers him to go on. So it's not like his super brilliant tech and money and things that help him. It's nothing about being self-made. It's literally all something that is a gift that is given to him. So again, I think both of those, Spider-Man and Iron Man, both really appeal to us in our American mindset. Iron Man from a very capitalism kind of idea and that self-made thing, and then Spider-Man for the so much of the common man who feel like they can't maybe get there on their own, and so this hope of something external empowering them. So I got a little bit lost in the weeds on that, but that kind of gives like an overview, I think, of some of why these super stories just resonate so deeply and have such cult followings. So in this one, you're dealing with the multiverse situation. So all of the villains from other Spider-Man come back, and also the other Spider-Mans, I think they called it the movie. Anyways, whatever. Spider-Man sounds more correct to me, but they all show up. And so there's a couple really cool things that happen in this. First off, Doctor Strange points out to Spider-Man that part of the problem, because he's thinking the problem is external, and he's like, no, 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 the problem is you're trying to live in two different lives. You're living two different identities. And so the Bible talks some about not being double-minded. There are people that talk about dual nature versus like getting everything into alignment. And so anytime our mind is fractured and we're living in kind of two realities, it's really problematic. And the Bible kind of deals with that. A lot of like inner healing kinds of things that the Christian different kind of streams will do, will really deal with helping bring heal that, so that you're not fractured in your mind, you're not double-minded anymore. So that kind of comes up. Another thing that comes up is the idea of mental health, because you have all of these different villains who they could just send back to their world, but suddenly Spider-Man's like, well, what if we could help them? Because when they go back to their world, they're going to get killed. And so his thought is, they're broken, like they're hurting, they've got mental health issues, let's fix that. So it really brings up a lot of ideas about criminal reform, and can people be reached or not? Are there things that can be fixed? Is it a medical, technical kind of problem? Is it a spiritual problem? Like, they don't really go into all that in the movie, but I think it brings up opportunity to have those discussions. So I used to work in the jail some, and just like, there's a lot of questions about yes, I believe anybody can be reached. There's nobody too dead, too gone, too lost that God cannot reach them 100%. But yet there's also a sense of our partnership in that we also have to respond. So what does it take? And when is somebody's problem mental, or chemical or physical? When is it trauma that's happened that needs to be just emotionally healed? When is it biological, and when is it spiritual? And I don't know, but these are really fascinating conversations. So a lot of great opportunity in this movie to have some really tough conversations that really you probably can't solve, but to really bring up these issues, and and to get a chance to really talk with people about, do you believe that there are spiritual answers to the problems, or is it always chemical? Is it always physical? So I would say take the opportunity and start having these conversations. Okay. So, how do we help people? Mental health. The other thing that I thought was really cool was this, all the Spider-Men start kind of talking together and sharing their like stories. And it's really like being in an AA meeting or something where, and it really should be kind of what the body of Christ is like, where they start identifying with their grief, their struggles, their, and you've got different ones that are, they're different ages. And so you've got generations kind of helping each other, but they're really, the two older Spider-Men are warning this new one, like, that his bitterness, because of that, if he doesn't deal with his grief, it's going to become bitter. And suddenly he's going to start losing his control, his self-control. And the other ones are like, we started not pulling punches anymore. Like, we started hurting people and became somebody we didn't even recognize for a while, because the grief ate us up inside. And so that sharing and that understanding, and then like one of them constantly feels like he's got some insecurity, and the other one's like, no, we need to stop and deal with that. I mean, it's hilarious. Actually, they do a really great job, but them wrestling with their insecurities and their need to be encouraged, their need to be, have life spoken into them. Such a great, it was a greatness in the movie. Like, it was hilarious, but again, such an amazing opportunity to unpack some of that and to like find out, like, where are your struggles? Do you have groups of people that you feel like understand your pain? Because really each of them had been so alone. They didn't feel like anyone, they're kind of in a unique situation. There weren't a lot of people that they could share with. So that was brilliant. And then the last thing that, to me, this is the gem of the movie. Um, it's this idea of understanding your actions come out of who you are. And so as they're trying to decide, should we help these people or not, or just send them back? And he decides to keep them all around at great peril to himself and people around him with the hope of trying to help and reform them. And people go, well, why would you do that? Like, they know what it's going to cost. And why would you do that? And over and over, himself, other people, everybody's like, well, that's who he is. Like, it's obvious. He does that because that's who he is. And that, to me, this is the nature of God. And it's such a great lesson, because what we start to realize is how often we do things transactionally, and not we do things because we think it's going to obligate someone else, or we feel like they should owe us at some point, rather than saying, I did that because that's who I am, period. And if it doesn't work or you don't respond, that's on you, but I'm still going to be true to who I am. And so, like, that's the nature of God. He is love. Everything he does comes out of that. He died on the cross to invite us into a relationship with him, but if we don't, he still would have died for us. He's still, the Bible says the rain falls on the just and the unjust, which rain in an agricultural society is like a sign of his blessing. So the blessings of God fall on the righteous and the unrighteous, the just and the unjust. Has nothing to do with how we respond. It is all about who God is, period. So I go back to that movie, Beauty and the Beast. This is like made it so clear for me. And I think the Lord totally showed me this because he was teaching me some areas where I did not realize I was being transactional. And but that scene where he's demanding that she come to dinner and they're arguing, and she's like, no, I'm not hungry, and they're fighting, and Lumiere and Cogsworth, like, they're like, dude, you gotta be nice, you gotta ask her nicely. So finally he gets his tone under control a little bit, and he asks her to come to dinner, please, and he says the right word. Well, now in his mind, I said the right thing, you have to come, and she still says no. No, thank you. And he gets furious, and he goes running down the stairs screaming in a rage. And this scene, I just, like, the Lord has showed me several times, it was like, that's how you're acting right now. Like, you said please, and so you think I'm obligated to do whatever. Or I played by the rules, I followed you, Lord, I did all the right things. Why don't I have X, Y, and Z, whatever it may be, that everybody else seems to have? Why don't I? And it's really easy to get bitter. And God's like, I thought you were following me because you loved me, because I'm worth following, but you're now only following me to obligate me to do something for you. Like, that's not, you're not actually following my heart, my life. Like, you're missing the point. And I'm like, oh gosh. Or, I do something nice for somebody, and I'm like, I can't believe they didn't return the favor or do this or do whatever. And he was like, I thought you did that for them because you wanted to extend my grace, my love, my kindness to them, because you wanted to be like me. And instead you were just looking to indebt them to return a favor to you. Like, that's not love. Oh, it's so convicting. So I love that in this movie, they go over and over and over. He is doing this at great cost to himself because it is who he is. It's an outpouring of his nature and his character. And I think that is such a challenge to us, to examine our motives and what we do, and to realize that we need to do things because it's who we are, not because of how people are going to respond. Those people may have never, he didn't know if the villains would respond or not. He didn't know if it would go well for him or totally backfired, but it's like, I have to be who I am, no matter how anyone responds. So to me, that was such a beautiful thing, and it's such the nature of not only the Lord, but who he's calling us to be as we follow him. So a lot there to challenge ourselves with, and to talk about with others, and to really, so I would say, like, you can ask people, like, do you feel like the people around you love you? People in church, whatever, like, however you want to phrase it, but have you encountered people who love you because that's who they are? Or do you feel like love always has a condition attached? It's like when you go on a date with somebody and then they have expectations. Well, I just paid for dinner, so, therefore you're supposed to do whatever with me. I was like, hang on a minute. You did that because you wanted to get to know me. I thought that was about who you were and what you wanted to offer, but now suddenly you were purchasing something. Like, that's not love. That's not good, right? So this thing plays out so many different ways in our culture. So ask people, like, when have they encountered conditional love versus that truly unconditional love, and what does that look like? And do they understand that the message of God is actually always in unconditional love, or do they feel like God's out to manipulate a response from them? Do they trust that or not? How do they live? Like, are they ever aware? Do they feel like they treat God transactionally? Do they expect that God owes them something because it's like, if I'm a good person, he owes me to let me into heaven? Or, all these different kinds of things that we do. If I don't sleep around before I get married, he owes me a good marriage. Or, like, I hear all these things and these kind of teachings that we do that we don't even realize we're kind of maybe subtly trying to help people do. I know when I was growing up, that was a huge thing, right? Like, if you do XYZ, then you're going to have these consequences. And if you don't, then things are going to go well with you. And then it didn't always work out that way. Sometimes you do the right things and it still didn't go well. And then people felt like God betrayed them. Well, the problem was the teaching was wrong in the first place. It was used to manipulate people rather than to say, we're going to love God and do the right things no matter how it turns out, because this is what's in our soul, because we want to love and honor the Lord. And so everything we have, we want to do it, to his glory. But instead it was like we were kind of manipulated a little bit, and it was subtle. But I'm looking back going, gosh, there was a lot of times where we were kind of fed this: if you do this, then you will get these blessings. And then if that blessing didn't happen, you're like, I totally got betrayed by God. So that's where I just, like, the Lord's been showing me more and more, like, refining in me that my following him needs to be without manipulation, without those expectations. It needs to be who I am, and loving him back the same way he loves me. So, like I said, I get really excited about things like this because I think it's a great opportunity not only to examine ourselves, but also to have some really cool conversations with people in your circles, whether they're believers or not, to help understand more, like, if they're not, why not? And how do you perceive the Lord? And to kind of unpack some of those things. So really cool challenges. I hope this gets the conversation rolling.